Because you're walking me through where you started in terms of, look, I walked in there a knucklehead. I didn't know that this was what I wanted, but I saw something that ignited something in me. I wanted to pursue it. I had random circumstances where I was able to exploit my unique circumstances to be able to garner, and suddenly you end up where you are. But like you said, like you're saying, like the kind of the path you're leading here is that you're making the most of the opportunities that you have. You're not trying to go, no, that's not the opportunity I want. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, no, I'm here. I'm learning a language. While I'm here, I might as well utilize this unique, because you were unique. Like you said, you were uniquely placed. You were aware of the fact that you had an opportunity rather than kind of letting it pass you by.
Yeah, I suppose so. I've never thought about it like that. But then I suppose as it went along, I then become, I suppose, different experiences and things like, I remember, for example, actually when I was living in France, Neil Ashton, who I mentioned before, was at doing the Sunday supplement, but he was working at the Mail at the time. And it was, I think, the 20th anniversary of Eric Cantona's Kung Fu Kick. And he'd been asked to go and find Eric in Paris, in the village where he lives, to try and get an interview, 20 years on, see if he'd talk about it. And if he wouldn't talk about it, then, worst case, like, you do like a nice colour feature piece about the area where he lives and what's his life like now, and speak to some people that know him and that kind of thing. And I was kind of asked to go along to like help with because I spoke French, to meet him, and I was living in Paris at the time as well. And I that experience was really useful because I could learn from Neil there in terms of how does he go about that process of basically trying to find a famous person, right? And what were his processes and his ways of doing it and things like that. And that was really useful for me probably 3 years later when I get a call from my boss saying Diego Costa's on strike at Chelsea. I don't know if you remember, he fell out with Antonio Conte.
Got the famous text message from Conte at the beginning of the season saying, you're not part of my plans, basically.
Yeah, saying you're not part of our plans. And he basically just spent the summer in Brazil.
Yeah, baffling move, but fair play.
Yeah, and it was the first week of the season. And I remember my boss calling me saying, do you want to go and try and find him? And I was like...
Shake your head like, what do you mean, go find him?
I was like, you're like, what, in the middle of Brazil? And if you take that really, really broad idea of how do I find a single person in this huge continent that probably doesn't want to be found, then it's a really scary prospect. But when you then start to say, okay, like, let's try and make a plan. And what's that plan? So I remember I spoke to a player that I knew at Chelsea at the time, and I said, are you sure he won't come back? Because I don't want to fly out there if he's going to be on the reverse plane.
Can you imagine?
Exactly. And this player said, no, he's definitely staying there. I spoke to him today, so I was like, cool. And then it's about what local knowledge can you find? So there was like local news reports of him living in his small village, him going to like a local futsal team to give out some awards and stuff like that. So I got in touch with the futsal team, and they put me in touch with like a local radio journalist in the town, and I agreed to meet up with that local journalist when I was there, because I was thinking, okay, if I don't get this interview, I'm going to build a piece about what's his life like in this town to make sure we get something. And once I get there, it's a really small village, and this thing that seems impossible from 5,000 miles away all of a sudden becomes the journalist saying to me, well, if you turn left here, turn right there, take a left, walk for 5 minutes, that's where he lives. I'll come with you, we'll knock on the door, I'll say that we've met for 20 minutes and you're all right, and maybe you've got half a chance. And I was lucky. That's probably for whatever people might say about things that I've done at the Athletic and stuff like that, still, like, without doubt, like, the thing I've done that I'm probably most proud of, don't know if most proud, the thing I've done that probably industry-wise had the biggest impact was probably that interview where you have a player who is on strike, who doesn't want to be interviewed, where it's a genuine exclusive interview that everyone's following up for the next week, and that was but my ability to make a plan came from that previous experience 3 years before, where I'm just sort of watching someone older and wiser and better go about their process.
Possibly, but I think you're using your own natural, because you strike me as the kind of person that just sort of takes everything in stride. I've never seen you flabbergasted or dumbfounded in an interview I've ever seen you do. So, but that speaks to, again, the innate nature. But
I think that's if you ask like friends or family or people that I've dated, and they will say, like, they are sometimes alarmed that I'm never really high or low.
Right.
And it means I kind of have this, like, very, very steady mentality. And this makes me sound really wanky and like an athlete, where you're saying, like, after a win, you don't want to be too high, and after a defeat, you shouldn't be too low. But really, and this, what I'm going to say next makes me sound even worse. But that idea of, as soon as that's done, like, the way that the news cycle works, it's that old saying of, like, it's tomorrow's chip paper, right?
Yes, right.
And you can't live off something you've done, like, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when there's so much every day to be finding out. And that's the most exciting part of the job, that it's the breadth of people that you end up speaking to, who have really interesting lives and stories and things like that, but also just the breadth of stories. Like, the amount of stuff that happens in sport is just ridiculous.